All right, let's go ahead and continue our discussion on loops. We're going to take a look at the while loop in this video. So let's go ahead and jot that down, the while loop. All right, so first things first, syntax. What does it look like? Well, it looks very similar to the do while loop. Actually, you can kind of picture it as the do loop flipped upside down minus the do. All right, so let's go and write out the syntax. I thought that was funny. So while a test condition evaluates to true, opening curly brace, code to be looped, closing curly brace. All right, it's that simple. Now, execution basically falls down into this loop, and the first thing that happens before we get into the loop itself is we take a look at this expression. We evaluate it to true or false. If the evaluation is to true, then we're going to do the contents of the loop. Otherwise, we're simply going to skip over altogether. Let's go ahead and write out an example, just like we did in the last video, and trace through it. So let's do the exact same thing. Int I equals 1 while I is less than 5, opening, and then inside here, let's go ahead and do, we all know this means console.writeLine now, so write out I equals and plus I. Okay? And then, that's a terminator, right? There you go. Make it a little easier to see. And then let's go ahead and increment I. So I plus plus, terminator. And then we'll go ahead and close our curly brace. You'll note that there is no terminator at the end of the while statement here. I just wanted to point that out. All right, so now to trace this dude, what's going to happen first? Execution is running on down, and it runs into, da-na-na, over on the stack, we have the variable I. And the variable I is initialized to a 1. We also have our console, so right over here I'll go ahead and jot down the console. Alright, so I is initialized to 1. Now we come down here to the while, and the very first thing we do is we check that local variable. We evaluate this expression. Is the contents of I less than 5? So is 1 less than 5? So 1 less than 5? Yes. So we'll say true, because that's what it actually evaluates, true. All right, so with that being true, that means we can now do the contents of the loop. So we are going to, at this point, fall down to right here, and we're going to write out I equals 1. Then we come down to the next line, and what do? We increment I from a 1 to a 2. Then we get down here to the closing curly brace, and what happens? We always loop back up to our expression. So here we are again. We need to evaluate I is less than 5. So what is in I? It's currently a 2, so is 2 less than 5? The answer is yes. So that means yes, we will do the contents of the loop. So we fall down into the loop right here, and I equals 2, because that is what is currently being stored on the stack in the local variable I. We then fall down to here, and we increment I by a value of 1. So I now becomes, let me give myself a little bit more room with this very teeny variable. So I is now going to be incremented to a value of 3. 2 plus 1 is 3. Once again, we hit our closing curly brace. We come back around up here to the top. We evaluate, is 3 less than 5? The answer is true. So 3 is less than 5, so we fall down inside where we're going to write out the contents of I. So I equals 3. Then we increment I, so what happens to 3? 3 becomes a 4, incremented by a value of 1. Now we have hit the end of our curly brace, so we loop back up again. So here we are. Is 4 less than 5? So that's the evaluation that's taken place. The answer is true. So we fall down into the loop, and inside the loop we say write out I equals, and the contents of I at the moment is 4, so we write that out. We then come down to I++, so what happens to the local variable I? Ding, 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 ding. It becomes a 5. And now what are we going to do? We are going to come back up, and we're going to check, is I less than 5? So is 5 less than 5? Answer, false. That's the end of the loop. So at this point, as soon as this becomes false, we will continue execution, and Logan will do just like last time. I'll just have you write finished. So finished gets written out to the console, and that is the end of it. Okay? So the key thing to remember here is that the loop will always, the guts of the loop, the code within it, will always execute as long as the while test condition evaluates to true. Okay? So Logan, let's go ahead and jot this down real quick inside of Visual Studio.
Okay. To do that, I'll bring up, once again, a console application. And let's begin with int I. So we've got int I, starts out as 1. Then we begin our while loop. So we're going to say while I is less than 5. Then we'll put in the blocking for our while loop, jump into that block, where we can do a console.writeLine. And we will write out I equals plus whatever is in I.
Okay.
Then after that, we will increment I. And after that, we'll do a, yeah, exactly, we'll write out, do a write line where we can say finished, followed by a read line, just so we have time to read stuff.
Exactly.
There's our read line. And I'll do a quick build to make sure that everything is happy, and we're good.
Okay, so we'll fall down into here, and then when we do, initialize I to 1. And while I is less than 5, we'll do the contents. Let's go ahead and run it, and then let's debug it.
Okay.
So look at that. I equals 1, 2, 3, 4, and finished. And let's jump back over here. Same exact thing right here. I equals 1, 2, 3, 4, and finished. So you can see how us tracing out the code right here resulted in the same results that were yielded back over here with Visual Studio and our application actually running. So go ahead and hit the Enter key. All right, now let's debug this. So we can go ahead and put a, there you go, breakpoint in, and let's run. All right, so here we go. We fall in here, and so first thing we need to do is go ahead and initialize I. So let's step. Okay, so now let's go ahead and fall through. So I at this point is going to be a value of 1. Let's go ahead and switch over here to locals real quick, just so that we can watch things. So I is a 1, just like we drew on the whiteboard. So let's go ahead and step into it, because that evaluates to a true. So we step into. So let's go ahead and step over where that's going to write out. And then I++, so let's go ahead and watch down here what happens to I. Go ahead and run it. Ooh, I now becomes a 2. So let's go ahead and run again and watch what happens. That's right. We just jumped back up here again, and we're going to reevaluate this expression. So now 2 is 2 less than 5. Go ahead and run. Okay, so now we're stepping down into, so step down into it. So now we're going to write this out because he evaluated to true. So go ahead and step over. Now we're going to increment I. Let's watch down here. Go ahead and increment. Look at that. It becomes a 3. So let's go ahead and when we come to this point, if we step, we'll come right back up here again as demonstrated on the whiteboard. So is 3 less than 5? The answer is yes. So let's step and go ahead and walk through it again. And then here we go. 3 becomes a 4 down here. All right, so step again. So now we're back up here. Is 4 less than 5? Yes, so go ahead and step. We back into the loop again. So step. Now watch 4 become a 5. Good. Go back up. See how it went back up? Now, is 5 less than 5? The answer is no. So watch what happens when he steps this time. It jumps all the way over because it evaluated to a false. I know this is long, tedious the way I'm presenting this, but for some people, this will be very helpful, those that have a hard time grasping the concept of loops. Okay? So we can now see, at this point, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're ready to execute this line where we're going to write out finished. So we can go ahead and come in here and finish off execution, and there you go. That's what we get, finished. All right? That's it. Now, of course, just like in the last video, we could definitely simplify this if we were to come in here and take this line out and put the plus plus over here. Let's go ahead and do that, Logan.
All right, so we'll simply remove incrementing I from there.
And we'll run it again, and we have the exact same result. Now, let's have a little bit of fun here. I like to try to throw extra stuff out here and there when I can. What if we change the logic of this up a little bit? Let's go ahead and kind of clear some of this out. Again, the idea here is I'm just throwing extra stuff at you that I just thought would be kind of cool to see. All right, so we're cruising along down here, and we're changing this up a little bit. So our syntax right now is I++. What if we had changed it to plus I? I just want to mess with your heads for a minute. Let's think about this. Let's have some fun. Let's trace it out. What are we going to see? Well, first of all, let's go ahead and erase everything over here on the console. And we'll just start from finish. If I'm boring anybody, feel free to stop this video because you have now seen how these guys work. Okay? So I always reserve the right to have a little bit of fun like this, right, Logan?
That's right.
So we're going to go ahead and come in here and initialize I to a value of 1. So we've done that. We now have a 1 being stored on the stack in I. We now come down and we say, is I less than, so is 1 less than 5? Answer, true. Now we come down here and we have this right line. This is very important. This is kind of a refresher on how this particular operator works. I holds the highest level of precedence. This is saying increment the contents of I by a value of 1 before you do anything at all on the line. So, all right, well, we better take 1 and increment it to a 2 or we're going to get in trouble. All right, good. Now let's execute the line, which says console.writeLine I equals, and what's the contents of I? It equals a 2. Wow, we've completely changed the output from this loop now. So we get a 2. Now we come down here, since there is nothing else, there's no reason to have anything else here. So once again, we hit the end of the loop, and the way the while loop works is we always come back up and we check. So is 2 less than 5? Answer, true. We fall down into the loop where we're going to write out the contents of I, but what's the first thing we do on that line? We increment I, okay? So I becomes a 3. So let's go ahead and update our local variable on the stack with a 3. There we go. And then we write out I equals 3. And then again, we fall to the end. We jump back up here to the top. Is 3 less than 5? Answer is true. We fall down back into the loop where we are going to first increment the contents. So 3 now becomes a 4. So let's go ahead and do this. So it becomes a 4, and we write it out. So I equals 4. Fantastic. Once again, we jump all the way back up to the top, and we check the contents of I against 5. So is 4 less than 5? Answer, true. Because 4 is less than 5. We fall down into the loop again. The first thing we do is we increment the value of I. So 4 now becomes a 5. And then we write that out. I equals 5. Okay? Then what do? We hit the end. We come back around. We evaluate again. So is 5 less than 5? No, it's equal. So this is false. We then exit out of the loop. And we write out finished. Different output this time, huh, Logan? We've shifted all of our numbers. Instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, we now have 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's go ahead and take a look at changing our logic around and how this does indeed affect what gets output.
Okay. So we'll jump back to Visual Studio where we can simply move the plus plus to the left side of the I. So we have some text plus I.
And that's all we've changed. So let's go ahead and run it. 2, 3, 4, 5, finished. Okay? Exactly what we saw over here. 2, 3, 4, 5, finished. The while loop is a very easy to use loop, just like the do while loop. All you got to do is remember to write the word while and throw in the expression. Then put your code in between curly braces. Once again, these curly braces are optional if you only have one line of code. Let's show that real quick, Logan. We've shown it once. This only has one line of code, so let's take out the curly braces.
Yeah, how this could be commonly written would be to just take the braces out, still leave the indentation after the while.
Yep.
And then we'd have the same result.
You got it. So just keep that in mind. So with all of that, the only other thing I just want to remind everybody, reiterate that with a while loop, you are not guaranteed to always have the code that's inside the loop run at least once. It is possible to enter into the while loop, and the very first time that expression is evaluated, it could potentially be a false depending upon the logic above this code. And if it is a false, we will never, that's a giant never, execute any code inside the loop, because if it evaluates to a false, we simply skip it and continue with execution. Okay? With the do loop, the one we looked at in the last video, you're guaranteed to have the code within the loop execute at least once, no matter what the expression evaluates to, true or false, because it doesn't evaluate until after the contents of the loop executes. Okay? Logan, is there anything you want to add to this?
We could drop that in the example.
Oh, yeah, good idea.
Back in the do while, we showed this by setting I to 10, showing that even though that was immediately going to make the expression false, we saw that the do while executed the right line.
That's
once,
right.
Just like we were saying. But in this case, if we start off with I equal to 10, run this expression, 10 less than 5 is false, so then we should see this line skipped altogether.
So it just should start by saying finished. Ah, that's beautiful stuff. We have proven it. Okay, anything else you want to add? That was great.
No, I think that's it.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to wrap up a look at while loops. And once again, as we progress through the programs we're going to be writing in this volume and in this course, we're going to be using these loops. So make sure you are comfortable with understanding how they work. So that wraps up this video. Thanks a lot.